Because the harder and stiffer that brush bristles are, the more abrasive and rough they are on our hair, which in turn leads to more damage and breakage. A perfect example of the worst offender of this is metal. Metal is obviously a material that is very firm, unflexible, stiff, hard, whatever you want to call it. So that would be something that is too rough and abrasive for our hair. The exact opposite of a metal bristle brush would probably be a boar bristle brush. Boar bristles are known for being incredibly soft and gentle, but the trade-off for that is that they're not as good at detangling as brushes that have stiffer bristles. So the goal would be to find some sort of happy medium that brushes through tangles enough while being as soft and gentle as possible. And that is where nylon bristles come into the conversation. According to Google AI, very scientific I know, nylon is a synthetic plastic material that is a type of organic thermoplastic known as a polyamide nylon. So in other words, nylon is a form of plastic, but not all plastic bristles are equal. You will definitely see that as we start to talk through these brushes. Some of them are harder and stiffer and more abrasive, whereas others are softer and gentler and more flexible. The second to last consideration is whether or not the bristles are ball tipped, which just means that they have that little round ball at the top of the bristle. I love how, like, was that supposed to be a ball? What is this? The reason why these kinds of bristles can be problematic is because your hair can catch on them more easily, which makes it more likely to break, especially if you are using a brush like that and brushing through your hair kind of quickly and roughly. That makes that more likely to happen with brushes that have ball-tipped bristles. But on the flip side, if you are brushing very slowly and gently, you can also kind of use those balls as a guide to see where your brush is catching and where you need to detangle with your fingers first before going through that with your brush. I say that because I used to do that exact thing when I was going through my severe bleach damage journey. I was using a brush that had ball-tipped bristles, and I was using that as a guide to see, okay, where do I need to actually put my brush down and remove the tangles with my fingers first before continuing on the journey so that I am the least likely to cause breakage possible. But I also recognize the fact that that is a lot more time consuming and just requires more patience and I was gonna say tediousness. I don't know if that's the word I want to use. I recognize the fact that that is not going to be everybody's journey, and for a lot of people, it's just going to be a safer bet to use a brush that has no ball-tipped ends. But the last thing to consider with the ball-tipped bristles is that they are often a gentler option for those that have really sensitive scalps. That ball is meant to kind of act as like a protective cover over an otherwise sharp bristle, and you will see as we talk through some of these brushes that some of them are really sharp and pokey and uncomfortable, and if you have a really sensitive scalp, if you have a scalp condition, then that might be a deal breaker. And the last consideration is whether or not your brush has a cushion. If you have no idea what I'm referring to, I will just show you as a quick example. So here's a tangle teaser with no cushion base, and here's a Wet Brush Pro which does have a cushion base. This is a consideration that I haven't found any scientific literature on. To my knowledge, I don't think there's any sort of study that would confirm or deny this, but basically the idea for those that are pro cushion based brushes is that this is supposed to be a gentler option because it gives the bristles more flexibility as you're brushing through your hair versus something that has no cushion at all is obviously just gonna stay firm. And the reason why I bring that up is because I feel like there might be some truth to that. All of my least favorite brushes, the brushes I found to be the most rough on my hair, cause the most breakage, are the brushes that do not have a cushion base. However, those brushes also have some issues with the actual bristles that are obviously part of the problem, so it could be a total coincidence, but maybe not. There could be something to that. Now that we know everything that is important to consider when selecting a hairbrush, let's talk through my experience in using all of these brushes, my thoughts, my review, which ones I would recommend and which ones I would not. I don't necessarily have distinct tiers for this video in the way that I maybe do for other showdowns, which is why I'm not really calling this a showdown, or maybe I will. But I do definitely have a distinct bottom tier. I can clearly separate the brushes that I enjoyed the least because, like I just said, these are the brushes that broke my hair the most. And the worst offender of said bottom tier is the Tangle Teaser Ultimate Styler. This retails for $16.99 and is claimed to have patented two-tiered teeth that have a unique bottle shape. There are two different lengths of the bottle shaped teeth, so they have longer teeth that are meant to deliver precision for capturing every hair while styling, and then shorter teeth which are meant to smooth the cuticle for high shine. I don't know about that. So these brush bristles are actually pretty tightly packed. I'll show you next to the Wet Brush Pro so you can see the difference. This one is significantly more spaced out than this right here. In the defense of the Tangle Teaser, the Wet Brush Pro is one of the more spaced out options, so I'll show you one that's kind of like middle ground. In an attempt not to completely disgust you guys, I'm gonna clean off some of these brushes as I go. I'm going to be using this brush cleaner I found on Amazon. It's so cheap and so handy for cleaning brushes. I genuinely don't know how I live without this. It gets all the fuzzies and gunk out. Okay, so here's the Tangle Teaser next to another brush that's not as widely spaced as the Wet Brush Pro, but still is more so than the Tangle Teaser. And I do think that that is part of the problem with this brush, amongst many. The other biggest issue is the material of the brushes and the way that that is designed. Because while they are incredibly bendy at the top, that bendiness and flexibility stops at the very tip. And you can see here, well, hopefully you can see, this might be hard to show you up close. There, you can see the base of the bristle, like from about halfway down, does not budge. It's very firm and very stiff. Like if I tried to bend this over, I would snap it off. And let me show you again, another brushes comparison. Look at how much I can bend these bristles. And because there are no boar bristles mixed into this, like there are for so many other brushes, that just means that this is all you get. There's nothing added to make the brushing experience softer or gentler. And that is something that I definitely felt this brush needed. It was the roughest on my hair. It pulled the most hair out. It broke the most hair strands. It honestly kind of hurt. It really is just too rough. And that makes me wonder how that would change at all if this did have a cushion base, because again, this does not have a cushion. It's completely firm and stiff, so there's no flexibility in the base. And then when you combine that with a lack of flexibility in the bottom of the bristles, well, you don't get a very flexible brushing experience, I'll tell you that. So I personally would not recommend this brush unless you are somebody that has very coarse Something stuck in my throat. Unless you are someone that has very coarse, resistant hair, you don't have damage, you're not worried about that, your hair is not fragile whatsoever, then by all means go for it. You may really love this brush. Know that I am coming at this video, I don't like the way I said that. Know that I am approaching this video as somebody who has fine hair, which means that my hair is very fragile. No matter what I do, what products I use, what my routine looks like, I am always going to have some level of breakage, just due to the fact that my individual hair strands are so fine, and as a result of that, so fragile, they snap very easily. Like I'm always gonna have that issue. So I am looking for the brushes that are the least likely to do that. So again, if you don't have fine, fragile hair, then you can do whatever you want. You can always do whatever you want. But my hopes in creating this video was to find the brushes that are going to be the gentlest on your hair for those that are looking to minimize damage. So with that being said, last place. Oh man, I'm about to offend a lot of people. Second to last for me is the FHI Heat Unbrush. This retails for $18 and has trademarked DuoFlex Anti-Static Bristles that allegedly work like magic. This has 58 long bristles for detangling and 47 mini bristles for smoothing and polishing, and it's supposed to be a gentle tangle release that offers reduced breakage. They call the back of this a vented cushion, and while it's definitely curved and like has some movement, it's not the same kind of cushion that you see in these other brushes that's soft and really squishy. Like this is still a hard plastic. But I don't even really think that that is the biggest issue with this brush. The issue I have with this are the bristles themselves. The bristles are significantly more flexible than the Tangle Teaser, I will give them that. But the material of these bristles is very rough and hard, especially compared to a lot of these other brushes. I keep holding this one up, but good example, like these are so much softer and gentler than these hard plasticky ones. However, they are very widely spaced. This is actually the brush that has the most widely spaced bristles. So I think that helps to offset the roughness of the actual bristle material. If this had gentler bristles with that wider bristle distribution, this would be amazing. But I don't think this is amazing. Obviously, it's getting second to last place. If you are someone that doesn't have tangly hair to begin with, I could imagine you really enjoying this brush and not having any issues. I know that that's why this has gone so viral, but I first tested this out when I did have severe bleach damage. And if you do not know this about bleach, it makes your hair insanely tangly. So if you always have really snarly hair and you're not sure why, and you get your hair bleached, well, that's why. Which meant that every time I wash my hair, I would get out of the shower and it would basically be matted together like a giant tangle. It would just get so insanely tangled that I really had to be careful with what I was using to brush through my hair. And like, not to be dramatic, but this ripped my hair out. I remember using this because at the time, this was like years ago, so it wasn't super viral, but I was starting to hear some things about it and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll try it. Sounds great. I had chills. This just ripped so many hairs out of my head because it caught on my tangles, and then the rougher material meant that it wasn't very forgiving and pulled my hair out instead of kind of like bending and then not even letting me fully brush through that. Does that make sense? So again, this is just a brush that I think is too rough for fragile, damaged hair. I wouldn't recommend it if those things are true for you. There are so many other brushes in this video that are far gentler and far less likely to cause breakage. Next in line is the Tangle Teezer Ultimate Detangler. This retails for $15.99 and also has patented 2-tiered teeth technology. So here's the Ultimate Detangler, here's the Ultimate Styler. The Ultimate Detangler bristles appear to be a little bit more widely spaced than the Styler, not by a ton, but a little. The thing that I think makes the biggest difference between these two is that these bristles are definitely bendier and more flexible than the Styler. Like, there's a clear difference. You can even see in like how much I can squish these down. Here, I'll go like this. Check it. However, I still have the same issue with these where they bend a lot at the top, but not at all at the base. So I think that combined with the lack of boar bristles and potentially the cushionless handle just again makes for a rougher brushing experience. It is significantly better for me than the Ultimate Styler. But when I compare how much hair breaks off while I brush when I'm using this versus my favorite brushes in this video, there is a noticeable difference for me, which is why this is in my bottom tier. I do want to quickly address the original Tangle Teezer. I'm sure I'll get questions on this if I don't. So the reason why I didn't include this in the official lineup is because it's not a brush with a handle. It's something that you have to like grasp in the palm of your hand. And because of that, I just find it a lot more difficult to use. Like, I just feel like I can't get at all of my hair in the way that I want to. And I know that that's just my own personal opinion. That's not going to be the truth for everybody. I know that a lot of people find this plenty easy to use and really enjoy it. So if that is the case, I would say out of all of these brushes I just reviewed, this one is definitely the most gentle. These bristles are even gentler and even bendier than this detangler right here. I'll show you. Let's do another like stack. And like here you can see they just bend over far more than the other two Tangle Teezers. So if you are interested in a brush that is set up like this in terms of the bristles, you don't want the boar bristles, then I think that this is the gentlest option. However, then you obviously have the trade-off of having to hold it like this and not having a handle. So the choice is up to you. I think that all the rest of these brushes are just better, but wanted to address. The last brush in my bottom tier is the Wet Brush Original Detangler. This retails for $8.99 and has exclusive ultra soft IntelliFlex bristles. It claims to glide through tangles with ease, offer less breakage, damage, pain. This is a brush that does have a cushion for a base, but it has ball-tipped bristles, which for a lot of people might be a problem. I like how widely spaced the bristles are, and I like the fact that the bristles are super flexible, but it still doesn't have any boar bristles, which I think is why this pulls on my hair so much more than the brushes that do. While I think this is a significantly better option than the Tangle Teezer Ultimate Styler, I still think it's just a bit too rough when there are so many other gentler options. The rest of the brushes in this video all have a combination of boar bristles and nylon pins. And almost all of them, except for the two that I'll talk about now, do not have ball-tipped ends. So I am going to separate them because of that. These definitely were more likely to catch on my hair than the brushes that don't have ball-tipped ends. Again, you may need a brush with ball-tipped ends if you have a really sensitive scalp, or if you want to use that as a guide, but recognizing the fact that that whole process of being like so insanely meticulous and tedious with brushing is not going to be for everybody. I'll just separate these and then we will move on to the rest. So my least favorite of the two is the Olivia Garden Ceramic and Ion Supreme brush. This retails for $32.25 and says it has Boar Supreme bristles for comfortable soft cushion. They refer to the nylon pins as Styler 7-row bristles, whatever that means. And they say that they are anti-static, ion charged, and have ballpoint tips. That's what they say. The nylon pins are incredibly flexible. They're a thin, kind of like soft, bendy material. And the ball at the end of these bristles is pretty small, so your hair is going to be less likely to like catch and snag on that than a really large ball. Not that any of these have really large balls, but compared to Wet Brush Pro, the Wet Brush Pro definitely has larger balls at the end. However, as you can see here, the Olivia Garden brush is definitely more tightly packed. The bristles are closer together, and I think that is why my hair ended up catching on this more. I just noticed that when brushing through, this was continuing to break/pull more of my hair than this one was, and than any of the others that we'll talk about after. I do have a way better experience with this than the Ultimate Styler or the Unbrush, so I do want to acknowledge that. I don't think it's a bad brush. If your hair's somewhere like in between, not super fragile and damaged, this was one that was enticing to you, I don't think that you'll be disappointed. I think it's a good brush. It's just that for my hair type, I think that there were better options for me that were a bit safer in terms of the breakage, which includes the Wet Brush Pro. So again, out of the two that have ball tipped ends, this one is my favorite. This is actually the brush that I was using when my hair was severely bleach damaged. Did I already say that? This was the brush I used because at that time, I just didn't know that all of these other brushes existed. I was kind of just like looking at Target and seeing what my options were there. And out of everything there, this was my favorite by far. So this is the Wet Brush Pro Shine Enhancer. It retails for $10.99 and has natural boar bristles with the exclusive ultra soft IntelliFlex bristles. These bristles are very flexible, but I will say compared to the original Detangler, I feel like these are just like a little bit softer. I don't know, something about this material is a little rougher, even though it says it's the same kind of bristle. I also noticed that the Wet Brush Pro doesn't have as many boar bristles as a lot of these other brushes, but in saying that, this is $10.99 and some of these other brushes are more than $100. One is more than 200. So that is something that totally makes sense to me. So again, I think compared to Olivia Garden, the reason why I see less breakage with this is just because the bristles are more widely spaced. This is still a brush that I recommend when people ask for an affordable option that they can just pick up at the drugstore, because I loved this while I was using it. I felt like it made such a difference compared to other things like the Unbrush or a wide tooth comb. Like those kinds of things just ripped through my hair. So this was like a breath of fresh air for me at the time. But again, I did not know about all these other brushes. I didn't test anything out, so I can't speak to what my experience was in using other things during that period of my hair journey. I wish that I could. But now in testing all of these brushes, I do think that there are even better options than this. So let's dive into those. So the rest of the brushes that we have here, I do still have a lot, Godspeed, again, are all brushes that have a combination of boar bristles and nylon pins, but now we have entered into the territory of the brushes that do not have ball tipped ends. And I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys. I, at first, was trying to create a rank order, like this is the least gentle to the most gentle, but I just don't feel I can do that. I don't think that there is enough of a difference between these brushes to make a major difference in the health of your hair, in your hair journey, in the amount of hair that breaks off. I think between all of them, the differences are so minor. I am still going to talk through all of these brushes and point out some of those minor variations because some are a little bit gentler, while as others do detangle a little bit better. But ultimately, the biggest difference that I notice in some of these that kind of like separates a few of them from the rest is quality and price point. And for the most part, those lower price point options definitely are lower quality. Like the quality is reflected in the price. You'll be able to see for some of them, the bristles look significantly more frayed. They just kind of like wear a lot more than some of the higher price point options, which have held up so much better and just have better quality. But that doesn't mean I'm saying these low price point options are bad. I will share which ones I think are better than others, but I want to acknowledge the fact that not everybody can/wants to spend a lot of money on a brush. That is not something that's a requirement for healthy hair. I never want anyone watching my videos to feel like they can't participate